The millionaire's baby cried upon seeing the new maid, and what he said
Goodness,
shocked
child,
everyone.
please stop
The
that
Thompson
racket.
family
It's
lived
just
in
a
a beautiful
wedding.
mansion on the outskirts of a bustling city. It
Oh,
was a place
dear,
of
what is he
luxury and
doing
comfort,
now?
where everything seemed perfect from
I
the
think he wants her
outside.
gloves.
Gregory Thompson, the head of the household, was a well-known millionaire businessman. He had built his empire from scratch, working tirelessly for years to create the success he enjoyed. With his sharp mind and keen business sense, he had turned his modest beginnings into a fortune.
Stop! Wait,
Now,
don't
with
go!
his wife, Alina, and their infant son, Oliver, life seemed to be exactly how he had always imagined it. The mansion was filled with expensive furniture, artwork, and the finest decorations money could buy. The couple had everything they could wish for, except perhaps peace of mind. The reason for this was simple. They had never quite managed to find the right person to help around the house. Over the years, they had hired and fired several maids, none of whom seemed to fit into their lives. Some were too harsh, others too kind, and a few simply didn't have the skills needed to care for a large home like theirs. It wasn't that Gregory and Alina were overly demanding, but they had high standards. They wanted someone who was reliable, hardworking, and trustworthy. Someone who could blend in with the family and care for their home with the same attention to detail they put into their own lives. And of course, they needed someone who could be trusted with Oliver, their precious son. Oliver was just a year old, and like most babies, he was the center of their world. He had a soft laugh, bright eyes, and a way of capturing the hearts of everyone he met. Despite his young age, he seemed to have an unusually calm nature. Even when strangers came around, Oliver would look at them with curiosity, then go back to playing without a fuss. He was the picture of a happy, well-adjusted baby. After months of searching, Gregory and Alina finally thought they had found the right person. Maria, a woman in her mid-30s, came highly recommended by a trusted friend. Her resume was impressive, and her references spoke of her kind heart, strong work ethic, and experience with children. She was soft-spoken, polite, and seemed to have the gentle demeanor that the Thompsons were looking for. Her past was a bit of a mystery, but Alina wasn't concerned. Maria seemed like the perfect fit. The first day Maria arrived at the mansion, she was greeted warmly by the Thompsons. Alina, with her usual friendly smile, introduced herself and Oliver. Gregory, ever the professional, shook her hand and expressed his confidence that she would do a great job. Maria nodded politely, her eyes reflecting a mixture of nervousness and gratitude. She had worked in many homes before, but there was something about this family that seemed different, something that made her feel both hopeful and a little anxious. After a brief tour of the house, Maria began her duties. She cleaned the rooms, organized the kitchen, and made sure everything was in order. She worked quietly and efficiently, her movements precise and careful. Oliver, who had been in his playpen, watched her with interest but said nothing. As usual, he seemed content and calm. It wasn't long before Gregory and Alina went about their day, allowing Maria to do her work. They trusted her to take care of things while they handled their own responsibilities. But as the day wore on, a strange thing happened. Oliver, who had been perfectly content just moments before, suddenly began to cry. At first, it was just a soft whimper, barely noticeable. But then, the cry grew louder, more insistent. Maria, startled, paused in her cleaning. She glanced over at the baby, unsure of what was causing the sudden outburst. Oliver's face was red, his eyes wide with distress. His tiny hands reached out, as if trying to grab something, but there was nothing he could grasp to calm himself. Maria walked over to him, her steps hesitant, unsure of what to do. She had worked with children before, and most babies found comfort in the presence of a caregiver. But Oliver's cries seemed different. It wasn't the usual hunger cry or the discomfort cry. This was something else entirely. She gently picked him up, trying to soothe him with soft words and a calming voice, but it was no use. Oliver continued to cry, his face contorted in a way that made Alina's heart ache. Gregory, hearing the commotion, came rushing into the room. He looked at Maria with concern, then at his son, who was now wailing loudly. He gently took Oliver from Maria's arms and rocked him back and forth, hoping to calm him down. Alina stood nearby, her brow furrowed with confusion. Oliver had never acted like this around anyone before. "Alina, is something wrong?" Gregory asked, his voice low with concern. "I don't know," she replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "He's never cried like this before. And it's just strange, he's usually so calm." Maria stood silently in the corner, her hands folded in front of her. She felt helpless, unsure of how to handle the situation. She had worked in many households, but nothing like this had ever happened. She had never seen a baby cry so desperately for no reason, and it made her feel uncomfortable. She could sense a tension in the room, a feeling she couldn't quite explain. Oliver's cries continued, and for a moment the house seemed to be filled with nothing but the sound of his distress. The usual hum of household chores was drowned out by his wailing. It felt like time had slowed, and everyone was caught in this moment of confusion and unease. Gregory, trying to calm his son, spoke softly to him. "It's okay, Oliver, everything's fine, Daddy S here." But the baby's cries only grew louder, more frantic. Alina looked at Maria, who was standing off to the side, her face pale. There was something about the way Maria looked that made Alina uneasy. It was as if she was hiding something, something that she wasn't saying. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Oliver's cries began to subside. His small body went limp in Gregory's arms, his sobs turning into soft whimpers. Alina, relieved that her son had finally stopped crying, looked at Maria with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. Maria's face remained neutral, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes that Alina couldn't quite place. As the silence settled over the room, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Why had Oliver reacted this way? What had triggered such an outburst? And most importantly, why had Maria been standing there so still as if she knew something no one else did? But for the moment, these questions remained unanswered. Gregory, trying to put the incident behind them, turned to Maria and smiled warmly. "Thank you for your help. I'm sure you'll get along just fine here." Maria nodded, but there was something in her eyes that made Alina uneasy. It wasn't just that she seemed distant, it was something deeper, something that went beyond her calm exterior. And as the day went on, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much more unsettling. The next few days in the Thompson household felt unusually tense. While the morning light brought the usual warmth to the grand mansion, there was an undercurrent of unease that seemed to linger in the air. Gregory and Alina tried their best to carry on with their daily routines, but the incident with Oliver's strange outburst remained in their minds. It had been hard to ignore, especially with how unsettled both of them had felt when the baby cried so uncontrollably upon seeing Maria. Maria, for her part, seemed to keep to herself. She was doing her job well, working quietly around the house, making sure everything was in order. She appeared calm, even distant at times, but there was something about her demeanor that made Alina wonder. She couldn't quite shake the feeling that Maria was hiding something, or at the very least, that the woman was carrying an emotional burden that she wasn't sharing. As the days went by, Oliver's behavior seemed to shift slightly. Though he had stopped crying at the sight of Maria, he grew increasingly quiet whenever she was nearby. At first, Alina thought it was just a phase, a normal reaction to a new person in their life. But after several days, Alina began to notice something more puzzling. Whenever Maria entered a room, Oliver would focus intently on her, his little eyes following her every move. There was no crying this time, but the intensity in his gaze seemed odd, as though he was searching for something in her. One afternoon, as Maria dusted the shelves in the living room, Oliver was playing on the floor, happily banging a toy drum. Alina sat nearby, reading a book, when she noticed something strange. Oliver had stopped playing and was staring at Maria. His eyes were wide, unblinking. He didn't move a muscle. His small fingers gripped the edges of his toy drum so tightly that his tiny knuckles turned white. Alina watched him for a few moments, wondering what was going on in his mind. She'd never seen Oliver act this way. She called his name softly, hoping to break his focus. "Oliver, honey, what are you looking at?" But Oliver didn't respond. He just continued to watch Maria, his gaze fixed and unyielding. Maria, too, noticed the strange behavior. She paused in her cleaning and glanced over at the baby. Her expression softened, but there was something in her eyes, something that looked almost like fear. She quickly looked away, trying to mask whatever it was she was feeling. Alina, sensing that something wasn't quite right, decided to address the situation directly. "Maria," she said, her voice calm but probing, "Oliver seems to be a little different when you're around." "Is everything okay?" Maria stiffened slightly but forced a smile, nodding as if nothing were wrong. "Of course, ma'am. I think it's just his way of getting used to me. Babies are sensitive to new people, right?" Elena nodded, not entirely convinced, but she let the matter rest for the moment. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Something about Maria's reaction felt a little too rehearsed, a little too perfect. And the way Oliver was acting, well, it made Elena wonder. Was it possible that the baby was reacting to more than just the presence of a new person? Later that evening, as Elena tucked Oliver into bed, she couldn't help but think about the strange incident earlier that day. She kissed her son goodnight, her fingers brushing gently against his soft cheek. As she turned off the light and left the room, her mind wandered back to the events of the past few days. What had made Oliver cry so violently that first day Maria came into the house? And why did he seem to be watching her so intently now? Babies didn't normally behave like this. Elena had been around enough babies to know that their responses to new people were usually quick and straightforward. Either they cried or they smiled. Oliver's reaction was something entirely different. Meanwhile, Gregory had noticed the tension too. It was clear that both he and Elena were on edge, and he was determined to find a way to resolve it. He decided to have a quiet word with Maria the next day to get to the bottom of things. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the baby's strange behavior and Maria's distant manner were beginning to feel like more than just coincidence. The following morning, as Maria prepared breakfast for the family, Gregory approached her. He waited until Elena and Oliver were out of the room, and then in a calm but direct manner he spoke. "Maria, can I have a word with you?" he asked, his tone serious but not unkind. Maria paused in her work and looked at Gregory, her hands stilling. She nodded slightly. "Of course, Mr. Thompson, is something wrong?" Gregory took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I've been noticing some things with Oliver. I know it may sound strange, but there's something about the way he's been reacting to you. It's not just the crying, it's the way he watches you sometimes. His behavior seems different when you're around." Maria stiffened, and for the first time, Gregory saw a flash of something in her eyes, a brief moment of vulnerability, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her usual calm demeanor. "I'm sure it's nothing," Maria said, her voice soft. "Babies can be sensitive, and it takes time for them to adjust to someone new. Maybe he's just curious." Gregory studied her face carefully, trying to gauge whether there was more to her words than she was letting on. "I understand that," he said, "but I can't help but feel there's something more here. Is there anything you need to tell us, Maria?" Maria hesitated. For a long moment, she simply stood there, her eyes on the floor. Gregory waited patiently, sensing that she was struggling with something inside her. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's nothing you need to worry about, Mr. Thompson. I've worked in many homes, and babies always react to new people in their own way. I'm sure it's nothing unusual." Gregory wasn't entirely convinced, but he decided not to push further. He nodded slowly, then turned and left the room, his mind still turning over the situation. Something didn't sit right with him. He wasn't sure what it was, but he had learned long ago to trust his instincts, especially when it came to his family. As the day went on, things seemed to return to normal, but Gregory and Elena both noticed how the atmosphere in the house had shifted. The tension was palpable, and though they tried to go about their day as usual, both of them felt a sense of unease. The incident with Oliver was still fresh in their minds, and now, with Maria's strange reaction, they found themselves wondering what exactly was going on in their home. Later that night, as Elena prepared for bed, she stood by Oliver's crib for a moment, watching him sleep. He looked so peaceful, so innocent, and yet the unsettling events of the past few days kept replaying in her mind. She couldn't understand why Oliver had reacted the way he did. What was it about Maria that had caused such a violent outburst? And why did it seem like there was something about her past that she wasn't telling them? Elena didn't know what the answers were, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the answers were hidden somewhere, just out of reach. She glanced over her shoulder at the closed door to the guest room where Maria was sleeping, wondering if the answer was closer than she realized. Days passed, but the feeling of unease in the Thompson household only grew stronger. The once lively and harmonious atmosphere had shifted. Though the family tried to move forward as best as they could, Oliver's strange behavior and Maria's distant, almost secretive nature hung over them like a heavy cloud. The more Elena thought about it, the more she began to wonder whether she was simply being paranoid, or if there was something deeper at play that she had yet to uncover. One evening, while having dinner, Gregory brought up something that had been bothering him for a while. As the family sat together at the large dining table, Alina noticed that Gregory's usual relaxed demeanor seemed a little more tense than usual. He had been quiet for most of the evening, and Alina could tell he was lost in thought. So, Gregory began, setting down his fork and looking up at Alina. "I've been thinking about Maria again." Alina's stomach tightened. She had hoped the conversation would never come up again, but she knew it was only a matter of time. "What about her?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm and neutral. Gregory leaned back in his chair, his fingers tracing the edge of his wine glass. I'm not sure. I don't feel right about the way she's been acting. I've been keeping an eye on her and I don't know. There's something I can't shake." Alina took a deep breath. "I know what you mean. I've been feeling it too. It's not just the way Oliver reacts to her, but there's something off about her, something she's not telling us." Gregory nodded, his eyes searching Alina's face for understanding. "Exactly. It's like she's hiding something, and I don't know why, but I think it's something important." They both fell into a heavy silence, the weight of their shared concern settling between them. The idea of confronting Maria was uncomfortable, but they both knew it was necessary. They couldn't ignore it any longer. But what if they were wrong? What if they were overthinking things, letting their imaginations get the best of them? The next day, Alina decided to take matters into her own hands. She had to find out more about Maria's past, even if it meant stepping outside her comfort zone. She wasn't the type of person to pry into someone's history, but in this case, her instincts told her it was the right thing to do. While Gregory was at work and Oliver was napping, Alina used the opportunity to do some research. She started with the references Maria had provided when she applied for the job. The names were all familiar, but Alina couldn't help but notice that there was a certain guardedness in the way the references spoke about her. They all praised her work ethic and kindness, but there was an underlying hesitancy in their voices that made Alina wonder. It wasn't long before Alina decided to call one of the references directly. The woman who answered was named Caroline, and after a brief introduction, Alina asked her about Maria. She tried to sound casual, as if she were just making polite conversation. "Hi, Caroline," Alina began. "I'm Alina Thompson. I'm just calling to check in about Maria. She's been working with us for a little while now, and I wanted to get a sense of how she's been doing." Caroline's voice, usually warm and friendly, suddenly grew a little more cautious. "Oh, Maria, well, she's a good worker, very reliable. But if I'm being honest, she's a bit of a private person. She doesn't share much about her past." Alina's curiosity was piqued. "I see. Did you happen to know if she's had any past experiences working with children?" Caroline hesitated for a moment before answering. "Yes, she has. She's been with families before and she did well. But I should tell you she did leave one family under rather unusual circumstances. Nothing too serious, but she got a bit upset when I asked her about it." Alina felt her heart race. This was it. "Do you know what happened?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Caroline let out a deep sigh. "It's hard to say. Maria never really talked about it, but from what I gathered, she had a falling out with that family, something about a misunderstanding. They accused her of something, but it was never clear what it was. After that, she moved on pretty quickly." Alina pressed for more details, but Caroline was hesitant to speak further. "I really shouldn't say more," Caroline added. "I'm sure you understand. She's a good woman, though. I don't think she'd do anything to harm your family." But Alina had heard enough. Her mind raced with questions, and she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that there was more to the story than Caroline was letting on. She had to find out what had really happened with Maria. Later that evening, Alina shared what she had learned with Gregory. He listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. "So, she's hiding something," he said quietly. "But what?" "I don't know," Alina replied, her voice filled with uncertainty. "But whatever it is, it feels like it's connected to Oliver's reaction to her. The way he cries, the way he stares at her. It's like he knows something we don't." Gregory stood up, his face hardening with resolve. "We need to find out the truth. We can't let this go on any longer." The next day, Gregory decided to confront Maria directly. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't something he wanted to do. But for the sake of his family, he knew it was necessary. When he found Maria in the kitchen, he asked her to sit down and talk. "Maria," he began, his voice calm but firm, "I've been hearing some things about your past. I think it's time we talk about it." Maria looked up, her face draining of color. She had been expecting this moment, though she didn't know when it would come. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down the dish she had been washing. "I don't know what you've heard," she said softly, her voice shaky, "but I can assure you I'm not hiding anything from you. I have my reasons for keeping some things private." Gregory's expression softened, but his resolve remained. "Maria, we just want to understand. What happened with the family you worked for before? Why did you leave so suddenly?" Maria's eyes welled up with tears, and she looked away, as if trying to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to spill out. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "It was an accident," she whispered. "A terrible accident. The child I was caring for, he died. It wasn't my fault, but they blamed me. I couldn't take it anymore. I left, and I've been running ever since." Gregory's heart went out to her, but the truth was hard to process. "Maria, I'm sorry for what happened, but you need to understand something. Oliver's been reacting to you in ways I can't explain. I think he knows something about you. I just don't know what it is." Maria looked up at him, her face full of sorrow. "I don't know how to explain it. Maybe he can sense my guilt. I've tried so hard to forget, but I don't know if I ever will." The room was silent for a moment as the weight of her confession sank in. Gregory, feeling a mix of sympathy and caution, stood up. "Maria, I believe you, but we need to figure out how to move forward. We can't let the past dictate our future." Maria nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I just want to start over. I never meant to hurt anyone." The following days felt like a whirlwind for the Thompson family. After Gregory's confrontation with Maria, everything seemed to shift. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and the heavy truth about her past was finally out in the open. The confession that Maria had made was something no one had expected. But now that they knew, everything seemed clearer, yet somehow more complicated. Elena and Gregory felt torn, sympathy for Maria mixed with a deep sense of unease. For the first time, they could see Maria's vulnerability. It wasn't just the guilt from her past. There was a rawness in her eyes that spoke volumes. She wasn't the stone-faced, distant maid they had initially hired. She was a woman burdened with memories, struggling to find peace. Still, the mystery surrounding Oliver's reactions remained. How was it that their baby, barely a year old, could pick up on something so buried in her past? It didn't make sense, but the more Elena thought about it, the more she began to wonder if there was something more supernatural at play, something beyond what the human mind could easily comprehend. Over the next few days, things between Maria and the Thompsons seemed to settle into a new routine. Maria continued her duties around the house, though now there was an air of solemnity to her work. She was quieter, more reserved, and every now and then, Elena would catch her gazing into space as if lost in her thoughts. Gregory, too, felt conflicted. He had spoken with Maria, and while he felt some relief that the truth was out, he couldn't fully shake the feeling that something was still off. But for the sake of peace, they decided to move forward. Oliver, too, seemed to calm down. His odd, intense staring at Maria had lessened, though he still appeared unusually observant when she was near. But there were no more tears, no more fits of distress. Still, something in the back of Elena's mind told her that this was far from over. One night, as the house lay still under the cover of darkness, Elena found herself awake long after the rest of the household had gone to bed. She stared out the window, watching the moonlight cast soft shadows across the garden. The house felt quiet, but it was the kind of silence that unsettled her, as if the walls were holding secrets they weren't ready to reveal. She thought of Maria, of her past, and of Oliver's strange, inexplicable behavior. Could babies truly sense things they weren't meant to? It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was right in front of her. Oliver had reacted to Maria in a way that went beyond the ordinary. Elena's thoughts were interrupted by a soft sound, a creak from downstairs. She sat up, her heart racing for no particular reason. She waited, listening. The house was old, and sometimes the floorboards made strange noises, but tonight it felt different. She could hear the faint sound of footsteps in the hallway below, the soft padding of shoes against the wooden floor. She got out of bed, careful not to wake Gregory, and made her way quietly down the stairs. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was it Maria up late, lost in thought? Or was it something else, something she couldn't explain? When she reached the bottom of the staircase, she stopped, listening for the faint sound of movement. The house was eerily still. Elena hesitated, unsure whether to investigate further, but curiosity got the better of her. She crept down the hallway, her bare feet barely making a sound on the floor. As she rounded the corner to the kitchen, she froze. Maria was standing there, staring out the window, her back turned to Elena. The moonlight bathed her in a soft, ghostly glow, and for a moment Elena couldn't help but feel that Maria was caught in a world of her own, somewhere far away. Maria! Elena's voice was barely above a whisper, but it was enough to startle the woman. Maria turned around quickly, as though she had been caught doing something she shouldn't. Her eyes were wide, her face pale. She looked frightened. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Maria stammered, her voice shaky. "I didn't mean to wake you, I couldn't sleep." Elena stepped closer, her gaze softening. "It's all right, but why are you up so late? Is everything okay?" Maria nodded quickly, her hands folding in front of her as if to hide her nervousness. I was just thinking about everything, about my past, about what I've done." Elena watched her carefully, sensing that there was more to her story than Maria was willing to share. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to," Elena said gently. "But if something's bothering you, I'm here, we're here. You don't have to carry all this alone." Maria's face softened, and for a moment it seemed as though she was about to break down, but then she quickly regained control. "Thank you, ma'am, I need to keep moving forward. I can't go back, not now." Elena didn't press her any further, though she couldn't shake the feeling that something in Maria's past had a much darker side to it than she had let on. As Maria turned to leave, Elena caught sight of the woman's trembling hands, and her heart ached with sympathy. She was clearly struggling, but there was something else, something deeper that Maria wasn't ready to confront. The next morning, Elena decided that it was time to speak to Gregory again. She couldn't ignore the growing feeling that they weren't getting the whole truth from Maria. The house, once filled with the simple joy of a family in their prime, now felt burdened with unspoken fears and hidden stories. She needed answers, and she wasn't going to rest until she had them. Gregory listened intently as Elena shared her concerns. He, too, had been thinking about Maria and her strange behavior. "I don't think we can just let this go," he said after a long pause. "We need to get to the bottom of this. Whatever it is that's haunting her, it's affecting our family, and we can't let that continue." The decision was made. Gregory would do his own investigation into Maria's past. He would visit the places where she had worked before, talk to the people who knew her, and try to uncover the truth that Maria was so desperately trying to hide. Elena wasn't sure what he would find, but at this point, they both knew that they couldn't let things go on the way they had been. Later that day, Gregory went to the local records office. He'd made some calls, gathered some information, and now he was ready to find out what had really happened in Maria's previous job. As he scrolled through the documents, the truth began to unfold, a truth that would shake him to his core. Maria had been accused of something far more serious than she had let on. There had been no accident. It was a lie, an elaborate cover-up for something that had gone horribly wrong. As Gregory pieced together the story, he felt a cold shiver run down his spine. What had Maria truly been involved in? And how would this revelation change everything for the Thompson family?